Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to this channel where we discuss everything tech. And today we are going to be speaking about robotic process automation. I've got my team here, my A team from Automation Anywhere, and they are the gurus of robotic process automation. So we're going to just have a conversation around RPA and just bring as much value as possible for our listeners, especially people that are in the process of wanting to implement RPA or they are contemplating on embarking on the RPA journey. We're gonna dive into quite a lot of the intricacies of implementing RPA and what RPA is. But before we get into that, I would like our esteemed guests to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Tine. Tine, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and just your involvement with RPA? And what is it that makes you so passionate about RPA? Because I know that you're very passionate about robotic process automation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hello, everyone. So my name is Tine Nyachimbo. I'm a sales engineer at Automation Anywhere, and I've been in the RPA space for almost 6 years. But I've been in the IT field for close to 20 years now. So what makes me so passionate about RPA is how you can easily, quickly get a project into production. So instead of taking a software development project, which takes like 3 months or six months, even longer, with RPA, you can get something working and running within a few weeks. And it can also help to save a lot of time where people are doing these manual and repetitive steps. So it makes people's lives easier. And a lot of our clients love their jobs after we introduce them to digital assistants that will basically take off that huge workload that takes up a lot of your time. And then you can focus on the more business-centric and human-centric work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tine. I'll now move over to Stefan. Stefan, please tell us a little bit about your RPA journey, who you are, and the journey that you've just been on with RPA. I know you're very knowledgeable when it comes to the solutions around RPA because you are the salesman with RPA.
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, and thanks for inviting us. And yeah, I've been with Automation Anywhere just over 3 years now. It's been a great journey so far. So I represent Automation Anywhere based out of Gauteng, looking after partners and customers for the company. And yeah, before that, I was also in another role with an automation company that I looked and managed partners and customers across Africa and Middle East for another probably 5 or 6 years before that. So, as far as automation is concerned, have been in this industry now probably about the last 9 years. Most of that also in cloud-based type of technologies, and it's truly something that I've seen grown quite extensively over the last number of years. Is the fact that cloud is really driving significant change in how automation plays out with customers and how they can deploy it and the value that they can get back from it. That's also, interestingly, that's also one of our key drivers for Automation Anywhere is the fact that we have deployed a fully cloud-based RPA platform, which customers can consume as they need it, so they can go up and down, and it makes it very flexible for customers to use RPA as they need it. Regarding the general observations in the market, there's just tremendous appetite at this stage for automation. I guess we'll get into some of these concepts in some of the subsequent questions that we're going to go through. But it's truly exciting to be in RPA, and it's actually evolved from just being RPA into what we now refer to as intelligent automation, because there's so many artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities that's now built into RPA, that RPA is a component and artificial intelligence, machine learning expands the capability of the RPA platform, hence intelligent automation. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let's now get into our conversation. Thank you for that introduction, Stefan, and just getting into the details of RPA. Let's then define what RPA is. Robotic process automation is such a buzzword, and people, to be honest, are quite intimidated when they hear RPA. People are either clueless or, people just shun away because this is a concept that they don't understand. So, let's define what RPA is in layman's language that any executive would understand. Um, Stefan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, happy to take the first part of the question. So I think we can break it up into the what it means for the business and potentially what it means technically, to go and deploy RPA. So first of all, RPA is a capability. It's a platform that we provide where you can very rapidly build processes, that you can automate processes through a drag and drop interface, where you build these what we call bots, essentially. So software robots. So RPA has nothing to do. So even though it refers to robotic process automation, it has nothing to do with the robots that we might see in movies or in documentaries shows where it's physical hardware. So it refers more to software that we use to automate business processes. The software happens to run on some local machines, the bot runners, and we then have servers in the cloud that manage the governance and compliance and the scheduling and all these attributes for the software bots. The primary thing with the bots is that the quick time to value that we can get with software bots. If you compare, for instance, having to code something using C# or .NET or Java or some language, it takes a long time and it's a very complex process and it's a costly process. So even if you want to try and integrate things through APIs, for instance, it takes a long time to build the code in order to integrate different systems with one another. And that's what we can achieve with RPA, is that we can integrate different applications. It doesn't matter what application a customer has, whether it's a legacy old application or a new web-based application or a desktop application. We can integrate literally with any application, either through the back end or through the front end. So through the user interface, we can train a bot how to log into a system, go through the different menus, and then start uploading information, for instance, into an ERP system. All of this being done while still applying business logic that is defined by the business. So it gives you tremendous flexibility, and we can build something like this in a very short space of time. So that's conceptually at a high level what RPA is about. So it expands from there, where we can, for instance, take information, unstructured information that's sitting on paper or PDF, and we can train a bot how to read this information from paper and PDF and extract the relevant pieces of information from the paper or PDF, so we can do something with it. So taking unstructured data, making it structured, and providing that in a structured format like a CSV file in Excel, where you can then manipulate the data, move it around, etc. So that conceptually, that is, let's call it the baseline of what RPA is. And we'll get into some of the other capabilities shortly. But I do want to make sure that I give some time to Tene as well, that Tene can perhaps also expand in some of these areas.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. I think maybe to put it into simple terms, the word robotic within RPA is standing for those things that you do as a human being on your computer, where you don't actually use your cognitive senses or where you don't think. So you're just doing it repeatedly. You've got a spreadsheet with 1,000 rows and you need to enter this data into an ERP. So you're simply copying and pasting data. So you're not using your brain for doing that. You're just doing something robotic. So we take that process and we automate it. So that's why it's called robotic process automation. So we use a software to mimic the human actions, like what you do with your mouse, the different clicks that you can do with your mouse, keystrokes, copying data from one place to another, all those things. And RPA works via the front end or via the user interface, graphical user interface. So the same way that a human being interfaces with an application, the software robot will be able to do exactly the same thing. So that's what RPA is in a nutshell.
Thank you. So it's, it works with repetitive, mundane tasks, right? That human beings would be doing. You train the robot or the software to be able to do that. Let's look at the trends. What are the global trends that you are seeing in the RPA space? I know that, before we started recording, we were just talking about how there's all of a sudden a massive uptick from the market in terms of demand for RPA. What are the global trends that you're seeing in the market?
Sarah, I'll take this one. So I think number one trend at this stage would be cloud is driving a lot of innovation within RPA at this stage. And really what cloud helps enable is the fact that you can drive quick innovation into the platform. So if you have a proper cloud-based architecture, we call this a microservices architecture. So it's the same way that, cloud-based systems like Salesforce or these kind of, born in the cloud type of companies work, where it's built on little microservices and not a big monolithic platform. So if you've got this kind of platform, it allows you to drive a lot of innovation into the platform, all the while, making sure that you've got good security in the platform, that it can scale in a very predictable manner. So yeah, I'd say cloud is definitely one of the key themes that we see as a big trend at this stage. So it's almost the overarching theme. Within this, there's, let's call it sub-themes, smaller themes that's playing out, which cloud enables then as well. So I've mentioned the fact that we've got this ability to structure unstructured data. So we call this cognitive automation. So that's where we use some artificial intelligence and machine learning to train the robots how to read documents, for instance, understand those documents, and being able to then structure that information. I think the next concept that is also quite prevailing at this stage is the fact that there's a lot of effort that goes into understanding the process. So before you even get to the automation phase where you can actually automate the process, you need to first understand the process, understand whether there's a potential business case for automating certain business processes. So there's a lot of, let's call it, movement in the market. So companies like ours acquiring other companies that help with this mapping and understanding of processes. Because the quicker you can map and understand the process, the sooner you can then get to the point where you say, is this a good process to actually automate? Because not all processes, it is a given, not all processes might be good candidates. Some processes just require so much human intervention that they might not be a good candidate. So you might be able to automate certain things before and after. But I think what we want to get to then with process understanding and process intelligence, as we call it then, is to get a better understanding of the complexities of the process, how often it runs, the potential business case for that. And that process intelligence capability is quite big at the stage where, as I say, companies like ours are acquiring these kind of technologies to incorporate and make it part of our overall offering, making it easier for the customer to understand and map their processes. And actually, we take it to the point where we provide a process design document for the customer with this technology. Much better way of going about it, because it gives you a very unbiased way to understand that process, the alternative being, if you interview people and try and understand the way that people are doing the process, it's very intrusive into their daily work life, into what they're doing on a day-by-day basis. Using technology in a data-driven approach, very unintrusive. So literally, we can record how they're doing their processes or executing their processes without interfering with their daily work, and it gives us, a very, very clear picture of what they do and how they do it, including all the alterations and variations of the process. So yeah, I think that those would be some of the key themes that we see playing out. I think the final one that I see as a big trend in the market at this stage would be automation, the automation theme in front office environments. So front office, if we think about contact centers, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time with very manual and repetitive tasks in contact centers to service customer requests. So in that contact center space, if you can automate some of these manual, mundane tasks, you can save a lot of time and energy. And this is one of the key themes that we see have taken off globally, especially if we consider some of the pressures globally, in terms of the Great Resignation and how quickly people move on from jobs. You don't get a lot of time to actually train people up. So you really need to be very agile in your organization and, finding talent, getting them to be able to do their job in a very short space of time. So that automation that we can bring in that space really helps our customers quite a lot.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Stefan. So then let's get into just understanding how RPA works. I know, Stefan, you've touched a little bit on that. Let's bring in Tineo, who's the engineer and the technical guy. Tineo, how would you explain to a layman, how does RPA work?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So RPA works in varied circumstances. So we cater for that specific particular process that we are looking at, but there are so many ways of working with RPA. So the first way would be to work via the graphical user interface, simulating what the human being would do, like I mentioned earlier. And then there's also the other way of working with background things like APIs. So if the software or the system application that we're working with has that ability, we can also do that. So usually we look at things like volume of data. So if the volume of data is so huge, then it would make sense to push that data via APIs. But if it's not, then we use the graphical user interface. The reason being it's more reliable and it's quicker and easier, and you don't have to rely on other parties. And then the other thing that I want to mention is we've got the capability for business users to automate some of their processes. So we have what is called like a universal recorder, which allows you to record yourself whilst you are performing certain actions, and then it will be able to repeat these actions for you, obviously with passing in some variable information as required. So that makes it easy for some technical business users to be able to automate their own processes. And then the other thing that I want to mention is the cognitive and AI side. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and start creating whatever capabilities that you need from the very beginning. You can make use of third-party tools that are readily available. So you can go onto GCP and you can go onto AWS, Azure, all their machine learning and artificial intelligence like natural language processing, conversations, chatbots, all those things. You can integrate them easily within RPA and get those capabilities into your processes quite easily.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's get into just looking at the use cases. I know that you guys have already touched a little bit about the different use cases. But let's look at the projects that you guys have worked on. Just give a sense to the listeners. What exactly have you been able to do with the different clients? And what kind of impact or benefits have you been able to see as clients have taken on RPA as part of their digital transformation journey?
Thanks, Sarah. I'll take this one. So, um, I want to start with the fact that obviously automation is not limited to a specific industry or functional role. It is definitely something that can be deployed across any different, many different organizations and types. Whether it's different vertical markets that we're looking at, like healthcare or banking and finance or insurance, or it really is, automation can be deployed across all of those different industries. So not limited to a specific industry. And even if we look within different types of organizations, the different functional roles can also be automated. So whether we're looking within the finance department or within sales and marketing or operations or HR or IT, there's many different processes that can be automated across these. I'd say a very large majority of the projects that we start working on, and this is almost the generalization, if we want to call it that. It very often starts in the finance department, purely because there's very clear rules in the finance department for their processes. So whether we're talking about a record to report or accounts payable or accounts receivable or taxation or treasury, reconciliations and reporting, these things have very clear business rules that apply to them, and the business case is easy enough to stack up for these as well. So we can say, if we have 400 suppliers that we work with, and we can then measure what the time it takes for a accounts payable clerk to process a invoice. We can then build a business case then to say, if we take that manual process of uploading invoices, capturing the information from them, and then uploading that information into the ERP system and ultimately getting it through the approvals and extracting that for payment. It takes a accounts payable clerk maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever the case might be per record. And if we automate this, we can bring that down significantly and show X number of saving in terms of the time we give back to that accounts payable person, that they can spend on something more more beneficial to the customer, to that organization's top line or bottom line, or their customer service, for instance. So the net effect of this is that we want to take this manual and repetitive process, for instance, in finance, that we can take care of, moving information around between different ERP systems and applying very simple business rules to it. So yeah, in finance, I'd say I've called out some of the major ones. Typically, I'd say a lot of the projects actually start in the finance. But what we also then see is, once there's success in finance department, at an executive level, organizations, the executive would talk in board meetings, for instance, or in their meetings, IT operations meetings, and that then starts spreading through the organization, as mentioned, into, for instance, the sales and marketing, procurement, operations, asset management, etc. So these would be some of the use cases. Within the finance function itself, I'd say a very, very large majority of the projects that we get to start on would normally touch on accounts payable. But there's a very clear use case for it. Typically, we find that the kind of value and efficiency that we can drive within that accounts payable process, you can stack up a good business case. Some of the benefits that we see with customers is that we can typically drive a 30% cost saving, at least a 30% cost saving in that process. And if we take, for instance, a very large organization, you can build you can stack up a business case just on the accounts payable. But as soon as you start adding a few more use cases, so maybe it's accounts payable with maybe some reconciliations, we find that the return on investment and the payback for the software and the deployment of this project typically is between, I'd say, 8 to 9 months, 10 months at most, where the software or the savings that you see pays back for the software and the deployment. So it can drive very significant return on investment if we start adding some. The second year, a portion of the cost is actually for building and deploying this in year one. As soon as you get into year two, you don't have that cost. So now the process is running. Maybe there's a little bit of maintenance that you need in order to, make tweaks to the process or adjust the process. But in year two, you don't have the cost of the deployment. So your return on investment just keeps growing in year two. And the idea is that you keep adding more and more of these processes, which just keeps driving up that return on investment over time.
Fantastic. Do you guys want to speak to some use cases within the public sector? I know that Automation Anywhere has worked with, some of the public sector where, you've actually done quite amazing things. When you think of, even unearthing corruption where there's been human intervention. Once you take away that human intervention and the robots are the ones that are doing the processes, that you've been able to save money on behalf of the client. Do you just want to speak to that a little bit? Tine, I know you've spoken to that before in one of the presentations that we've done. Do you just want to touch a bit on that?
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, that's quite correct. So RPA can also help with things like compliance, in the sense that sometimes when human beings are doing some tasks manually, they can manipulate the data, and in the end, it can result in some financial loss. So what was happening in one of the municipalities, people would, after someone has resigned, they would change the banking details on the interim file before it gets processed. And then eventually those people wouldn't be taken off the payroll, and then the payment would continue going to some people within the organization who were benefiting from that. So when we introduced RPA, we took away that manual touch point. So after the file has been processed, there is no way for a human being to then go and manipulate the banking details. And also the offboarding of those employees, to make sure that when someone leaves the organization, they are not just offboarded from the IT systems, but also from HR and payroll systems, so that they can no longer get paid whilst they've already left the organization. And also things like retaining company assets. So using a bot, you can also check things like whether the person has complied with their offboarding process, whether they've returned the laptop, whether they have paid off any of the loans that were pending to them, and all those things. So we did a lot of activities for one of the municipalities, and we saved them thousands of US dollars in terms of money that was being laundered through this human manipulation. So that's some of the benefits that you can get from using RPA.
Thank you. And are there more benefits? So we're talking issues of costs. Also just in terms of once you take away human touch points, you're able to actually take away financial loss. What other benefits come with RPA implementation in an organization?
So some of the benefits that we've profiled across, working many different customers. So we do keep tab on that as much as possible. Sometimes the organizations are happy to share these data points, sometimes they're not. But from the customers that we've worked with closely and profiled, typically we find that we can affect revenue growth in organizations by, I'd say, up to 20%. Again, profiled. Customer experience can be improved by as much as 50%. So imagine, if employees no longer have to act on these manual and repetitive processes, and you can deploy your employees into areas where they're really going to benefit the company. So meaning, for instance, better interaction and more regular interaction with your customers. you can drastically improve that customer experience. Other areas I've mentioned, the cost saving, which we find on average is at least about 30%. We've had many projects that Tina and I have been engaged in where that cost saving can go to 40 or 50%. So it can be very significant cost savings where you can reduce the cost of the customer. We also find that there's a very significant impact that we have on the operational metrics for organizations that we work with. So typically, we can improve the operational metrics like accuracy, cycle times, productivity, and those kind of things. We can improve that by 30 or 40%. It obviously means the quick time to value through all of these. So the quicker we can drive these efficiencies, the quicker we're going to show value back to the customer, and that means ultimately that the software pays for itself in under a year. So to give you an example, a real life example of a customer that we started working with at the beginning of this year, they went through a formal RFP process. It was to automate their accounts payable. The accounts payable team is, let's say, 55 people strong. They transact thousands of invoices on a monthly basis. And they wanted to find the efficiency because they didn't have headcount in order to just keep adding more and more people to the organization, but yet the organization was growing. So what they decided was, offset some of the inefficiency that they have in accounts payable, and that they can use the people then in other areas where they're short-staffed. So that's exactly how this played out. And the impact of the deployment of this accounts payable process, we managed to take down the average time it took them to process an invoice and get it uploaded into the system, and get everything ready for the invoice was about 6 minutes. Using the software bots, we managed to take that down from 6 minutes per invoice down to 8 seconds per invoice. So extremely fast. So that drives that efficiency and frees people up then to do better things. Apply their mind into more areas that's more stimulating and beneficial for the company.
Wow, that's amazing. Hey, from 6 minutes to 8 seconds. Yeah, that's great value right there for investing in the software robots. Let's look at steps that an organization would have to follow when implementing RPA, if they are to implement RPA successfully. What steps would an organization embark on?
Sarah, typically organizations go through 3 phases when they start using automation technology. So there's the actual start, and in the start we find that typically they would treat it almost as a proof of value. So let's see what the impact is of this technology in our organization, how it's adopted, how we can really grow with this. So is it going to accommodate in our organization, and does it really deliver the value that it says on the box? So the start, typically we find that our customers identify between 3 to 5 processes, and they will then embark on this journey to automate those 3 to 5 processes over the next, let's say, I'd say around about 4 to 6 months. Typically, you don't want to start with the most complex processes. So find something in the organization that is that can be high value, that can take away the most amount of time and energy for people to move, information between different systems. So find something like, for instance, moving data from this application to the next, which a lot of people spend time on. So once you implement that will give you some, let's call it, internal currency in the organization, then, where a lot of people will then take notice of these projects, and they'll also think, how can we also use this technology in our space? Whether that started off in finance and now the operations manager is thinking, how can I potentially also automate certain processes? And that's where you start getting into the transform phase. So or the scale phase. So scaling is where it was mainly in one division or business unit, and now this automation capability is starting to spread across multiple business units within the organization. Maybe it started in finance, now it's going to operations and HR and IT, etc. Typically in the scale phase, we find that organizations then start to deploy this into more business units, and there you find that they typically automate between 15 to 40 or 50 different processes. And the next phase that you then find, and the scale phase can last anywhere between then 6 months to 18 months into the journey. From there, you then find that you're getting into the transform phase. So the transform phase is where you almost reach this concept of, we first automate. So the first, when we have a new project, we start with the automation as a baseline. So it's not a add-on to the, so you kind of start with that mentality, and that's where you then start seeing rapid deployment of many bots. You also start seeing things like, for instance, citizen development, where you get more people across the organization that are able to build the framework for this, and actually build their own bots, which they can hand over to someone. So these are some of the major concepts. I think one of the key things in successfully deploying it within organizations is, from the very onset, to have a change management plan, working with the structures like, for instance, HR, to really get people comfortable with this technology. And I've seen projects where that wasn't, for instance, done properly, where people might fear the robots, or bots being put into place to replace them. And I can honestly say in South Africa, that's not the case. Across the organizations that we work with, the automation is put into place to free up people's time, so we can use people in other areas where they can be a lot more useful to the company. Bots aren't put in place to replace people, because you always find that there's more work that everyone has to do than they have hours in the day for.
Absolutely. And Steph, that's a very important point that you make, because the moment people hear of bots coming into an organization, people are immediately thinking that, these bots are coming to take away their jobs. And that's very, very important to communicate to people. And it's part of the change management system to let people understand that these bots are coming in as helpers. They're coming in to take away the repetitive, mundane work that generally human beings actually don't enjoy doing, so that human beings then can focus their energies on high order work, things that are more interesting, things that are more engaging, things that bring value, like probably engaging with clients rather than sitting all day long to copy and paste information from one system to another. So I'm glad that you brought in that. We nearly at the end of our time. I see we are almost at 12:30. Do you guys still have like maybe another 5 minutes that we can stretch, or do we need to end it now? Are you guys running off to another meeting?
No, I can. Yeah, we can go another 5.
So we're good to go on. Hey, okay, fantastic. So then I would like us to get into just a conversation around the mistakes that most companies make. What mistakes have you seen as you've worked with companies that they make when it comes to implementing RPA? Tine, do you want to go first?
Okay. I think Stefan alluded earlier to choosing the right processes. So if organizations don't select the right process to start with, that can sometimes cause an issue. So you need a process where you've got total control of the operations within that process. If there are dependencies on other things or other entities, either internal or external to the organization, that might cause the automation process to take longer to put into production. And then there's also things like the choice of the technology. So if you choose the wrong technology, which is not best suited for your organization, then you might end up having challenges. So if you come back to talking about the cloud, so cloud makes the total cost of ownership much lower than if you're going to put the platform onto your premises. for the mere sense that the platform requires high capability servers. So that's an additional cost that will come with a platform that is not sitting in the cloud. Whereas if you go for a cloud platform, you already forego that cost of needing the servers to be sitting on your premises. And then involving the right people within the project. So you need the project sponsor who buys into the project and who is willing to be the stakeholder responsible for the platform. And then you would need the supporting people, like the business people who are going to be supporting the process. That change management aspect you spoke to earlier, you need to make sure that these people, they buy into the idea and they see the benefit that comes with it. So I've got a very good story where one of the departments within a government entity, they were always losing people, and they were trying to figure out, why are we always losing people? So they were hiring people who've got a degree in accounting. And when these guys get hired to do financial accounting, what they were actually doing was translating accounts from one format to another, which is a very boring and repetitive thing to do. And then these guys would get bored out of their skulls, and then they would just leave. But the moment they implemented RPA, they delegated that task to a robot to do. And then these guys could actually use what they went to university for. So they could actually start thinking and making some business decisions. So in some cases, RPA actually helps with retaining employees, unlike the way that people think that sometimes people start, there's higher attrition where RPA is. Even in call centers, we have found that call centers where they've got digital assistants, because they've got that higher probability of success with most of the tasks being done in the background by an RPA, it means that they've got this good customer service and they love their jobs better and they stay longer as well. I think Stefan can add on to that.
Fantastic. Yes, Steph.
Yeah, no, it's something that we've seen across many different customers, especially in the contact center. As mentioned, that's one of the new trends. One of the areas that's particularly exciting for me as well, especially if we start looking into banking, finance, healthcare, insurance, etc., where there's very large contact center environments where we find that efficiency gains that we can drive there absolutely means that we can, if people don't have to be retrained on multiple systems, and we can simplify that experience in the contact center and get them working faster and more efficient and on less mundane things. As Tane says, it just means that they're gonna last longer in that environment. They're gonna enjoy it more. So that just means that attrition is not as high.
Fantastic, fantastic. Such a great conversation and very exciting conversation. And it's important that these conversations come to the fore because, no one is thinking that RPA will actually help with retaining jobs because people are so focused on thinking, RPA is going to eliminate jobs. So that is really a very, very valuable point. Let's talk about how then organizations can overcome challenges when it comes to RPA implementation. What should organizations do to overcome the challenges that comes with the implementation of RPA?
Sarah, so I think one of the key things is that you need a cross-functional responsibility in these automation projects. So typically the requirement, the need will be within the business. So when I say the business, it would be finance, for instance, that starts off by saying, we need help. We need to automate some of these processes that we work on. But clearly, finance is not responsible for the systems and the platforms that they run on. That's actually the responsibility of IT. So there needs to be this collaboration between IT and business, that they can work together in finance, for instance, or IT and business, that they acknowledge that they need to work together in order to bring this efficiency about in the company. So we call that a center of excellence, or COE for short. So without this collaboration between business and IT, very often you find that the business might try and find other solutions. So we call that shadow IT, obviously, is where they don't necessarily have this cross-functional collaboration. And then finance decides, they'll go and try and find some other solution, that they buy a cloud-based solution and just try and hack it on their own. So that would be one of the key areas to start with, is that this cross-functional. I think the next part is then that there needs to be executive ownership as well. So very often these kind of projects can be complex because it's cross-functional. You need an executive sponsor that's going to take ownership of this and say, you know what, this has very meaningful impact in the business for us and can drive very big benefits for us down the line, for us and our customers and our shareholders. So there needs to be that exec that's going to say, I'll make sure that we can properly manage this through the different phases that we're going to go through, and these are the outcomes that we're driving towards, kind of pulling this project together. So these are some of the main areas. I'm not going to talk about the technology challenges. That technology challenges are various, and sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Sometimes projects are smooth, but as far as people and process is concerned, and technology, these are some of the main things. I think the final one, maybe if I want to call out one, is just the understanding of processes within the organization. There's very few organizations out there that have their processes, all of their processes mapped out, and where they can pull up a document and tell you these are the standard operating procedure for our processes. Or there might be standard operating procedure, but they're not followed. So an understanding for organizations of their own processes is normally not there. So that is the first hurdle that you normally find, is we want to automate the process, and then everyone's looking at each other and asking, what is the process? So that means that we first have to figure out what the process is.
Mapping out of the organization processes, very, very important, hey, to the success of implementing RPA. And let's discuss also just things that an organization needs to consider before embarking on implementing RPA or getting on the RPA journey. I know, we've touched quite a bit in bits and pieces, but just in a nutshell, what things should an organization be thinking about as, this conversation of getting on an RPA journey, ensues within the organization? What things should they bear in mind?
I think one important aspect is to look at their technological landscape and look at how stable that technological landscape is. So it doesn't make sense if you are going to be automating maybe your CRM platform and you intend to change it in 6 months' time. It means that you need to redo that automation process. You need to teach the bot again how to work with the new CRM platform. So those are some considerations. Is your technological landscape stable, or are you expecting to make some changes in the near future?
Thank you. Stefan, do you want to add anything that companies will need to bear in mind?
Yeah, I think maybe architecture and what's the journey that this organization is going through. So we are finding that there's a lot of adoption of cloud. So taking the cloud journey into consideration, taking the security protocol that is being deployed into consideration. These are some of the things that I would think has a very meaningful impact on the decision ultimately of the how RPA will be implemented and deployed and scaled. Because if your base is set up properly, it means that you're putting yourself in a good position to grow. You don't want to set up a base which doesn't allow you to scale and grow. Because I've seen projects where customers deploy RPA maybe in an on-premise environment, and where it starts scaling. As soon as you start scaling, it's one thing if you automate 1 or 5 processes, but as soon as you start moving from 5 processes into 50 or 100 processes that you're now automating, that underlying architecture that you've put down can be a limiting factor, or it can be an enabling factor for you as well. So very important to consider that baseline that you put down from an architecture point of view.
Fantastic, fantastic. What a great conversation. And finally, in closing, let's look at the buying process with regards to RPA. So an organization has thought through and they are convinced they do need to go the RPA journey. What would be their buying process then? Where do they start? What do they do?
Sarah, so typically customers or prospects that we start working with would start by identifying the use cases, the areas where automation can potentially have a benefit for their organization. So first step is, what are the use cases? Are the use cases just within the finance department, or does it span several different departments? Then someone needs to apply, and typically this is where the executive sponsor for the project then needs to make some decisions to say, if we start, do we just start within a department or a business unit, or do we attempt to scale this across multiple departments? Because it is important that beginning, that start is very important, that we want to show value very, very quickly back to the business, because that sets us up for further success, where, if success breeds success. So once you have success with that automation project, it will naturally start growing into the next and the next and the next. So use case is number one. Once you've got the use cases identified, you then want to start thinking about the business case, the potential return on investment that the company will get from the automation. You want to think about the actual processes. Are these processes clearly defined? Is there any documentation on these processes? So, if it's very early on in the buying cycle, or the exploring phase that you're in, you then want to start thinking about mapping out those processes. So maybe there's a business analyst that can start mapping it out for you, build the documentation on it. Maybe you can use technology to actually map out that process. And then I think, the journey from there depends on customer to customer, but it might take the route of a proof of concept. It might take the route of a proof of value. Proof of value is obviously a longer, where you're actually putting processes into production, versus a proof of concept, you're just proving the concept, and it's maybe deploying the technology in a sandbox environment where you run it for 2-3 weeks and just show that we can interconnect with multiple systems and automate a particular process. And then the final stage, once you're through that proof of concept or proof of value, you getting into the actual, in certain cases, we find that customers go, they know they've decided on which vendor they want to go with. They will then do a RFQ that's closed and put it out to a number of partners that works, professional services partners that they work with. In other cases, it might be an open tender, that goes through the formal process, where it's truly open and you kind of just work through the tender.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been such a very interesting conversation around RPA. We will end here and leave it just here. And probably the next time we can look at other aspects of RPA, such as, how does an organization set up a center of excellence? Those are things that we can go through in our next podcast. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time to come and share your valuable knowledge with our listeners. Until we meet up next time, cheers from my side.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for having us, Sarah. All the best.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.